32 teams, 32 shows. We have the Cowboys to talk about tonight, Matt. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah. Fire it up. 32 teams, 32 shows. Dallas Cowboys. Let's roll.
So we get the Dallas Cowboys. We've had a lot of Jera quotes throughout the last couple of weeks, which is kind of standard for Dallas Cowboys camp. But this is your defending NFC's champion, and they are the preseason favorites to win that division after losing in pretty comical late game management fiasco fashion to the 49ers last year in the wild card round. Led the league in scoring a season ago, score over 20 in all but 2 of the regular season games. And the defenses, I'm sure, will be a very interesting point of conversation here, Matt, with how up and down they were, where you lead the league in turnovers forced. They gave up a whole lot of penalties, a whole lot of passing yards, bottom half of the league in total yards allowed, but we're 7th in points allowed. And we'll see, based on some of the offseason additions here and subtractions, how we think they stack up. And the moves were, though, pretty significantly notable on really both sides of the ball here this offseason.
Yeah, so Mike McCarthy, head coach, Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator, Dan Quinn is your defensive coordinator. Very good defense, as you mentioned, coming back. I mean, if you look at what they brought in, really the only thing they really brought in of note is Dante Fowler and James Washington. And as we know, James Washington is no longer. I mean, at least for what we're looking at, 8 to 10 weeks.
8 to 10 weeks.
8 to 10 weeks.
Like foot injury.
With all of that. Now, they did lose, however, trading away Amari Cooper. He is gone. Randy Gregory is gone. Lyle Collins is gone. Left guard Connor Williams is gone. Keanu Neal is no longer there. Cedric Wilson is gone. And then even Greg the Leg is gone as well. Throw him in there because, hey.
Young GZ? Yeah.
You know, Greg the Leg.
Well, did you see Jerry's comments today where they've 2 random kickers I've never heard of, and he was like, yeah, I'd like for us to just be able to make some extra points this season. Like, I guess the 2 kickers have just been horrible so far. They're missing like 25, 30-yarders, and it's like, boy, I wish we could make some extra points around here in camp. So
yeah, I was
it's interesting.
I had a buddy who was actually at Bengals camp today, and he was just talking about.
We got our first Bengals of the year. Bengals.
I said it earlier.
Bing.
Hey man, don't gang up on the 2 Southerners at the desk. All right, come on, man. Come on.
This guy from Wisconsin over here.
Big Brett Favre guy growing up.
Yeah,
right?
big Favre guy in Wisconsin. He was at a Bengals camp, and he was saying that there were field goals getting made from 66 today.
Whoa.
McPherson is a beast.
It's not bad.
Yes.
It's not bad.
McPherson's a beast.
And the teams are back on the field in Canton, Ohio.
All right, here we go.
Thanks, Kelley. Thank you, Kelley.
Here we go.
25 minutes away from kicking.
About to start
I only
their
brought that up
stretching.
just because, the kickers have been awful so far.
Yes.
They did give up.
Well, I mean,
the leg.
look, it's a thing, right? I mean, like when teams have when teams have really bad kicking, that's when we notice, right? It's like if it's middle of the pack, we kind of just glance over it. The guys that are really good, we really only kind of hone in on a couple of those guys. Really, Justin Tucker's the only guy that really gets a ton of love from anybody. Outside of that, it's just the bad kicking situations is what we focus on, and that is a big thing here that we could watch because I mean you need guys that can make clutch kicks when it comes down to it. In the draft, they took Tyler Smith, offensive tackle, in the first round. They took Sam Williams, defensive end, in the second round. In the third round, they took wide receiver Jalen Tolbert, who is going to end up having to play a little bit bigger role than he thought.
Rookie of the year, let's go.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll hit on that because you and I went ahead and just put in some speculative tickets there. More grabbing a number than anything else on Jalen Tolbert. Tight end Jake Ferguson in the fourth round. And then they had 4 fifth-round picks in which they took a tackle, a corner, a linebacker, and a defensive tackle as well. Kelley, I guess this is as good a time as any. We did take some Rookie of the Year Jalen Tolbert action because of the situation there. He's going to have to get in earlier than expected, and we were getting a fat number that was a little bit off market, so we figured we'd try to take advantage.
Yeah, it's one of those like we talk about with golf all the time. One thing we're lucky about being in Vegas is sometimes we get some different outright numbers, award market numbers that are different than the kind of blanket numbers you see rest of country. It was really just a book. I don't think that it reacted to the news. We caught it very quickly after the James Washington news had come out about him missing a significant period of time, and able to grab it at 50 to 1 here in town. Very quickly moved down to 12 to 1. And that's where he sits at right now at DraftKings. So, like you said, Matt, completely a numbers play. We don't really know exactly how they're going to utilize him, but just looking at the depth chart, for the wide receiver position for the Dallas Cowboys right now, he's going to be number 2 or 3 to start off the season, it looks like, unless they go out and add a veteran wide receiver here at some point.
That's a Cowboys team, at least if you look at the PFF positional rankings, 12th in the preseason wide receiver room. It's like, where do you go from there, Matt? I don't know. You had a decent amount of depth, but it's kind of like I had this talk with Mike Pritchard the other day on Lombardi Line, where it's like you lose a guy like that who again is not expected to be a huge piece, but all of a sudden it becomes, well, you're one CeeDee Lamb injury away from like, what are we doing here? So that's the question.
Oh, yeah. There's been a lot of shows that have talked about it all summer long on NFL Network and ESPN and stuff like that. I think that the way the wide receiver market blew up this offseason, I think the Cowboys maybe regret that Amari Cooper trade right now. That is, they are so thin at that position. Only getting back a 5th round pick for him, it feels really cheap. It feels like they would really want to have him right now.
Yeah, so Tolbert's definitely going to have to start for them now at this point. Again, barring some sort of acquisition. Gallup and Lamb, and we don't even know really Gallup's situation really at this point. They're saying he's going to be fine, and he's saying he's going to be ready to go. But
they're saying he's not going to be there week 1, right?
But they're saying that week 1 is at least in question with all this. So, Tolbert's going to have to play early there. So I certainly don't hate us putting in a speculative number on that, especially if you consider that maybe this Cowboys team isn't as good as people think, and they end up having to throw more, and they end up having to kind of get some garbage time yards and touchdowns and different things and stuff like that. So,
and even besides that, though, Matt, we already know they're already going to be one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL, right? Unless we're really expecting them to shift out how they're doing things from last year.
I think that's an interesting point to bring up, though, because we've had more of the discussion now, the Ezekiel Elliott versus the Tony Pollard. It's like we've seen how efficient Pollard has been. Only 2 of the running backs have forced more missed tackles than Pollard since 2019.
Yeah.
All of his advanced stats are better than Elliott's, and it's like, okay, Jerry Jones comes out and says we still want Elliott. We are going to build the offense still around him. He is the guy. Well, it's like, should it really?
He pays the bills.
He does pay the bills.
That's the thing.
But it's like what realistically will end up happening. This is still considered to be a top 10 offensive line. So we have to figure that out with Dallas. Also, how repeatable are the turnovers there on the defense, and how does that impact our handicap on Dallas for this upcoming season? We'll do that, look at their schedule, and the rest of how they stand in the NFC East when we return. 32 teams, 32 shows here on Primetime Action. As far as our continuation here, 32 teams, 32 shows, Dallas Cowboys. The question, my big question, Matt, and we can easily look at this and say, just from a raw analytical standpoint, okay, well, you lead the league in turnovers. That's going to be really, really hard to duplicate the next year. So automatically you're going to expect some regression there. That's what Dallas did last year. We know how good and you'll read it in a second, the DVOA numbers were on them. What should we actually expect out of this defense here, given how hit or miss they were as a whole a season ago, with more hits than misses by a long shot?
Yeah, they were the number 1 overall team, DVOA, in 2021, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that DVOA doesn't factor in penalties, so there's that. They led the league in penalties, actually, with 127. So if that got factored in, it'd be a little bit different. But 6th overall offense, 2nd overall defense, and then 6th overall special teams. They were actually 6th in early down success rate on the offensive side of the ball. They were 7th in early down success rate on the defensive side of the ball. So they were moving the ball early pretty well, and they were preventing other teams from moving the ball early pretty well. If you look at what Football Outsiders has them right now, 6 to 8 wins, 24% of the time, 9 to 11 wins, 44% of the time, and then 12 plus wins over a quarter of their simulations, 27% of the time. They have this team at the 12 plus win threshold. 63.7% of the simulations had them making the playoffs. So it is, again, another team that at least the projection systems here tend to like. All right, Sharp Football has them at the 10th easiest schedule in all of the NFL. So he's got them at 10.5 wins. 14th offensive line, 13th receiving core, 13th defensive front seven, 16th secondary. Of course, those rankings came out before the James Washington news. Pro Football Focus, 12th power ranked team heading into 2022. A lot of it with that offensive line being as strong as it is with Tyron Smith, Tyler Smith. You've got Zach Martin. You still have Terrence Steele. So there's a lot of talent still on that offensive line for this Cowboys squad. And so you would assume a couple of different things. One, they will have success running the ball, which for whatever reason, Jerry Jones still wants to do a ton of. And two, when they do pass, Dak Prescott should have some time. So he should be able to operate back there. It's just, can CeeDee Lamb produce enough in this offense? Because now, without Washington out there and with the question marks around Gallup as it is, you rarely see teams pay a ton of attention to a rookie receiver. So, especially a third-round rookie receiver, second-round rookie receiver. So it's like CeeDee Lamb could find himself in a lot of double coverage and a lot of kind of over-the-top type coverage things. And then does that frustrate him? Does that frustrate Dak? How does this? Do they try to run too much? Do they revert back to the old Cowboys philosophy of kind of just pounding in the middle of the line with Ezekiel Elliott? So there are some question marks, at least on my end, as to how this might function now with kind of that wide receiver situation.
It's really interesting schedule too, especially right out of the gates here, where you get to open with 2 home games, but you have Tampa, Cincinnati coming in. That's a really kind of an awkward way to start, where you have the pressure as a team on you right away. Where if you got to at the very least split those. If you somehow start off the gates 0-2, and that's 2 home games to begin. Again, the schedule lightens up significantly after that, by and large, because of you have Washington and the Giants. Although who knows how bad those teams actually will be, and you'll get home games against the Lions and the Bears as part of the crossover with the NFC North. But the first 8 weeks, as we look at the schedule, it's not at all straightforward. Even though by the end of the day, you get to where the metrics come out, and it is 10th easiest schedule, but there's a lot of you talk about all those question marks. They'll have to find answers pretty quickly when you consider they then go at LA, the Rams in week 5, at Eagles right away in week 6. So a lot of question marks to answer right out of the gates there, you'd think.
Yeah, and they're only dogs right now in 4 games. They're dogs in week 1 to Tampa, as you would expect. They're like a point favorite against Cincinnati. So that's negligible, but whatever. But they're dogs to the Rams. They're dogs to the Packers, and then way out in week 17 for whatever reason, that at the Titans game, they find themselves as a 1-point dog right now. But they're going to be favored in every other game that they play, over the course of the season, unless, of course, again, things can get derailed. There's no doubt about it. But, it looks as if they're going to be favorites in the majority of the games.
Between those, the at Packers, at Vikings, who knows if one of those ends up flipping from now, from now to then, week 10 and 11.
But it's a pretty favorable. You could be looking at a team here. Let's assume a loss in week 1 to the Bucs. But if they were to, let's call it, upset the Bengals, whatever, coin toss, whatever it might be, and then you go Giants, Commanders, and then you get the Lions, you get the Bears, you get the Giants. There are some pretty easy spots that are mixed in with some rough spots, but it seems like every rough spot is followed by a soft landing. Right. And a rough spot followed by a soft landing. Rough spot followed by a soft landing.
The bye, almost, perfect dead center of the season, and then you come back off the bye, Packers, Vikings, but then that final 7 games is a pretty big cakewalk to the end of the regular season.
Because I'm down on the Titans, so to me that looks like an awesome way. I was going to say that looks like an awesome way to close out the season.
You're talking. 4 of your AFC South opponents are from week 13 on. It's very interesting.
Home against the Giants, Colts, Texans, at Jags, home against the Eagles, at Titans, at Commanders. I think that's a pretty nice way to close out the year.
This defensive line, it depends on whether you classify Micah Parsons as a defensive lineman or not, is kind of how you would rank whether you think this is a good defensive line or not. DeMarcus Lawrence is awesome. We know that. But if you paired him up and say that Parsons is a defensive lineman, then you have 2 of the best. Then you have one of the better defensive lines there is, but Parsons kind of moves all around. So it's kind of hard to go with all that. Lawrence is actually second rated edge rusher in all of football since 2017, according to Pro Football Focus's ratings out there. And of course, as we know, Micah Parsons, the number 1 overall defensive player in the league last year, according to a bunch of rankings and ratings out there. So, he's just a phenomenal player for them. And the secondary is where there could be a little bit of a question here, though, because you do have some guys that I think there is at least a little bit of upside with, but you have some real question marks. Trevon Diggs, there is upside there, but the problem with Diggs was he was either making big plays or getting absolutely torched, right? He's one of those guys that takes some risks, and with those risks, you end up putting yourself in situations where you give up big plays as well. And so I'm sure they're going to talk to him about some of that as well. Malik Hooker's kind of had an up and down type deal. So there is at least, I think, some questions in that secondary as well. I don't think this team is as good as they were last year. I think this team actually overperformed last year. I think they got a little bit lucky. And so everyone knows I like the Eagles in this division as it is anyway. I don't think the Giants are even crazy out of the picture here in this division. I do not think it's a slam dunk that is the Cowboys division for sure.
See, I'm with you where I think they're undoubtedly worse than they were last year. I think that's for sure. And I think the Eagles are clearly going to be better than what they were last year. The other two teams, I have very little feel for and don't think they're going to be that great, at least. They're both going to be pretty poor. So the only question is this Cowboys schedule, is it real? I mean, does it factor into being so easy that it does somehow allow them to, possibly overperform again this year? And they might.
I think the win total is super appropriate.
Yeah, 10 on the win total, minus 250 to make the playoffs. It's not one, I don't really see a scenario where you'd really want to lay a price like that, given the question marks we have on them. It's like, would you either take a miss the playoffs plus 195, or look at the alt under here and under 9, or if you could find a 9.5 out there. I'm not sure what would be the more optimal play there. I think there's that market up at DraftKings where you could pick, will they finish top 2 in the division? I'm like, I don't know if they're going to win it or finish second, but I'm pretty sure they'll be in the top 2. And I feel that way about the Eagles too.
Yeah, the problem here is just the NFC is just so much weaker than the AFC is, and so it's hard to bet against the Cowboys, even if you're kind of down on them like I am, and I think that maybe collectively we all are, because you start to look and you just go, yeah, but they're still going to be favored in 12 of their games, and it's just it's very hard to pick apart that schedule's pretty easy, and then that conference in general is pretty easy.
You would think we'll find out a lot, though, those first couple of weeks. Home Bucks, home Bengals to start the year. 32 teams, 32 shows on the Dallas Cowboys.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.